Thank you all for having me here. I'm really excited to be joining the Clarity Conference. Thank you to Gina and everyone who's worked tirelessly to pull this thing together during these crazy times. But first, hi, I'm Alison Rand. I am currently Senior Director of Design Operations at Envision, and I've been doing this work in its many iterations since the 90s. And at that point, it was mostly defined as program management, project management, and mostly found in design consulting. So I get this question a lot. What is it you do anyway? Let's provide visibility to the business, says every design leader. This probably sounds really familiar to many of you. I know I've heard it a ton. Design operations is a relatively nascent discipline within design, but as I said, it's been around for some time in different shapes and forms. The genesis of it came from a time when tech firms began acquiring design studios and needed to figure out a way to make their design teams more effective, scale the work, and come up with the means to communicate and partner across the organization. This all in the hopes that capital D design processes could begin to take root and change practices to be more customer-centered. So if the nature of design is inherently to change an organization, at some level, things are changing at your organization. For some of us, this is small. For some of us, this is huge. Design leadership and change are inextricably tied. It's part art and science. And design operations is that soft layer to what has traditionally been a very scientific change management field. And we, as design operations leaders, are those specific types of change agents. Change requires more than a single vision or a few projects. It takes careful orchestration throughout the organization to become a part of the working fabric of day-to-day operations. So it's a process by design. But first, please chill. This is what they tell me all the time, because no one actually wants to hear this or know this or feel this. It's a lot. I think when most design leaders are hired or design ops leaders are hired, it isn't really thought of that they're going to be undertaking such a huge part of fundamentally changing the organization. So what is mutualism? From an ecological perspective, mutualism is a relationship between two species of organisms in which both benefit from the association. From a sociological perspective, and this is a mouthful, the doctrine that the interdependence of social elements is the primary determinant of individual and social relations, especially the theory that common ownership of property or collective effort and control governed by sentiments of brotherhood and mutual aid will be beneficial to both the individual and the society. So suffice to say, this has been around way longer than design was a thing. Again, ecologically speaking, imagine the honeybee. We're all super familiar with honeybees. Honeybees, they're everywhere, right? Flowering plants rely heavily on these insects and other animals for pollination. The bees are lured to plants by the sweet aromas from their flowers. When the bees collect nectar, they become covered in pollen. And as they travel from plant to plant, the bees deposit the pollen from one plant to another. We all know this. We've seen this. We've learned this in school. But honeybees perform about 80% of all pollination worldwide. A single bee colony can pollinate 300 million flowers each day, which is like insane. And 70 out of the top 100 food crops, which supply about 90% of the world's nutrition. 90% of the world's nutrition are pollinated by bees. 1 out of every 4 bites of food people take is the courtesy of bee pollination. And with the current crisis of the honeybees' population's decline, we may lose all the plants that bees pollinate, all of the animals that eat those plants, and so on up the food chain, which means a world without bees could struggle to sustain the global human population. Our supermarkets would have half the amount of fruits and vegetables, and food scarcity would become a very real issue. The system would begin to break really fast. And sociologically speaking, this is the belief that mutual dependence is necessary to social well-being and that community is built on the interdependence of that social fabric. In the book Community by Peter Block, he states, social fabric is created one room at a time. It is formed from small steps that ask, who do we want in the room, and what is the new conversation that we want to occur? I would challenge this a bit more to say, who do we need in the room, and what is the new conversation that we actually need to occur? In community building, we choose the people and the conversation that will produce the accountability to build relatedness, structure belonging, and move the action forward. So what does this have to do with design systems? Going back to the whole chill thing, this is like, please focus. And when you come in as a design operations leader, or just hired in a design operations role, and you're first trying to figure everything out, it's really hard to see the forest for the trees. In both my last and current role, when we were trying to build out a foundation for design operations, it's been easiest to focus on that practice of building out a design system, as a design system is a tangible artifact that the business can usually get behind. And as you're building that center of excellence, it becomes that connective tissue that makes sense. So this is the framework in which design operations functions. I know this is the framework I use and which I function under. It's the people, process, systems, or platforms framework. Design systems, as you can see, operates adjacent to design operations. But you can also see how the system is interrelated and built on that mutual dependence. When you're thinking about people, you're thinking about building culture and community. When you're thinking about process, you're thinking about the infrastructure under which those people operate. And then when you're thinking about systems, you're thinking about building those foundations that can move the ball forward. Helios 1 is our design system at Envision. Developing a shared language is what it's built on. It's about partnerships, it's about relationships, it's about trust, it's about meeting people where they are, driving towards cross-functional alignment to create that shared language. The design layer in operations and in managing change, again, is that art to the science. It's relational. It's about building an environment where change is ready to be received, which involves psychological safety, trust, empowerment, and community. I've tried to boil down some of all the change management academics into 4 key snack-size principles that can help establish that basis for the shared language. The first one, start with a small group. Do not come in hot. No one likes this. In the past, this has been one of my biggest mistakes, thinking that I knew it all and that I could figure it all out by myself. Remember that this is a process that should lean on human-centered design practices. Discovery, which is in good part listening to learn. Figure out the partners that want to work with you and the ones that don't. Both matter. Understand the high risk of failure at your specific organization. You're going to need a coalition. Gather and build momentum based on the urgency for the change that needs to be implemented with support and advocacy, bottoms up and tops down. This is critical. Design systems as Trojan horse. The way I see it is that a design system can build that source of truth which enables trust and empowers what should ultimately become customer experience operations. We are building systems that are bridge connectors in service of greater good. But if we think about how to unlock that potential, we have to be, a little chill about it. Roadshow it. In advertising, the term effective frequency is used to describe the number of times a consumer must be exposed to a message before the marketer gets the desired outcome. I think this is 7 times. And I've had mentors in the past tell me that I need to repeat the message. And this model applies directly to messaging within an organization. Those steps can be around sharing the idea, interacting with the people it will impact and getting their feedback, and targeting the message to those people. A strong communication strategy and plan is a big part of the success of how you bring people along with you. Rinse, wash, repeat. And lastly, surviving victory. which isn't last at all. And it ain't over till it's over. Don't celebrate too soon. It's a game of inches. Because when one thing is done, there's more to be done, and you'll have to start all over again. This is a journey. And we're all just at the beginning. And even though at the Clarity Conference, we already have that shared understanding, a majority of the people and partners we are working with do not. Remember that. Continuous enablement. At its core, this is how we do. This is what design operations is about. It's about effectiveness. It's about the corporate buzzword of efficiency, 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 but it's really about unlocking trust. And there's a lot to be said for the level of maturity of an organization before design operations is brought in. In this envision model, design operations is usually brought in somewhere between level 2 and level 3. But that doesn't necessarily have to do with the ability for the organization to adhere to the practice of what design operations actually means beyond the day-to-day tactics. Design operations can facilitate that scale of the system. Be mindful of what level your organization might be in and retrofit your plan to what that stage might have an appetite for. Design systems, again, often fit into the earlier stages as they can prove themselves out in the end-to-end product experience. The system's work is actually measurable. So suffice to say, design ops is not just about design, and if we aren't considering the system, then we're destined to fail. So how do we think beyond our immediate context, understanding the power of context and how it works from each part of the organization's perspective? I have often said, I'm not a designer. And some very good and supportive colleagues have pointed out to me that process design is also design. So organizational design, we've talked a lot about this, and the kind of foundations of design operations was built on the book Org Design for Design Orgs. But the genesis of org design began at consultancies, really, and at the heart of it, at the core, it's transformational work. This is change management. But it's done from a design lens with intentionality aligned with the org strategy, and really the vision of what are we driving towards for our customers and ourselves. Again, considering the context and thinking about systems, not symptoms. The symptoms are the noise, and the system is the signal. When I think of my work and how I function as a leader, and how a design system should also function is in service of the community, with the flexibility and resilience to enable autonomy, confidence, growth, and change. Servant leadership roles play offensive by ensuring their teams or the practices they build will resonate with diverse needs in the marketplace, being proactive instead of reactive. So how do we actually walk the walk? At the end of the day, we have to understand it's not about design, it's not about engineering, and it's not about product, it's about the customer. So in order to push ourselves to deliver on the best and most cohesive end-to-end experience, we need to do more than introduce new or modify existing products or services. We need to change how our companies work and perceive innovation. And we as a collective need to be deeply focused on the system rewiring that needs to take place, rooted in an understanding of how community and hierarchies form, how cognitive loads impact decision-making, and how the pull of conformity and obedience continues to lead us down deferential paths supportive of a single type of evolution. By building systems and leveling the playing field, we provide inclusive access within an organization, along with the process that it takes to get to a shared understanding. We build a foundation that is equitable and inclusive. The conversations and who gets invited into the room are the beginning. A fully baked system that is leveraged and evangelized across disciplines breaks the invisible gatekeeper to create equitable access to institutional knowledge and opportunity for the whole organization. Changing systems of governance is the work of transparency and oversight of other interdependent systems, such as infrastructure and accountability. often cracks in the system go unreported, ignored for the sake of speed and delivery. But it is here that equity, diversity, and inclusion can be seen in the data measured in the system, measured in the output. So how do we actually set the environment for change to be received? The word dynamic is really important here, as it's a constant. It's full of positive energy. Think about those you are trying to lead through it and how we can allow them to inform the process. My dear former colleague and friend Alexis Lloyd said this often, so often, that she put it on a t-shirt: move thoughtfully and fix things. It applies so well to what we are trying to do in thinking about how we are here to serve and how the making and practice will have influence beyond our immediate context. It's a call to action, and in some ways a manifesto that we are here to set the precedent. Thank you.
Alison, wow. I was taking notes, and the way that I take notes is I just try to write down like really important phrases, and I ended up just transcribing your whole talk. So I just stopped and decided that I'm going to listen and watch this later. I have lots of questions. There's questions pouring in from the chat, lots of good chatter. The first question is, when do you think a joke becomes a dad joke?
Oh my gosh. I don't know.
When it becomes apparent. All right. Also, I don't really think it's inappropriate to make a dad joke if you're not a dad, but it is a faux pas.
Ooh, bump.
Yeah.
Good one.
All right. Let's talk seriously for now. We're totally on the same wavelength about so many different things. I love that you talked about bees. I think there's a lot to learn from ecology, right? And like kind of biomimicry. In my latest talk about design systems, I talk about beavers and how beavers, they make things in nature like for themselves, but a ton of other species end up actually like inhabiting the things that they make. So like woodpeckers live in their trees and herons live in their swamp, like all of that kind of stuff. And one of the concepts related to that is the idea that beavers and bees, there's a term that's used for those. It's called ecosystem engineers. So when I think about design systems folks, I'm like, we are ecosystem engineers. Are design ops folks the same thing? Are design ops folks ecosystem engineers too?
I think so. I think if we're doing it right, we are, for sure. I think that's where the whole please chill comes in, because the way that I approach things is from that kind of ecosystem engineering perspective and thinking much more horizontally. And oftentimes I think organizations just are hiring or thinking they're hiring people in design operations to just operate programs or projects. But really in the core of the definition of a design operations leader is that you're there to scale design, which is inherently means that you're there to change the organization, because that's why design is there to begin with. But there's just oftentimes a real, there's just it's the translation that gets lost.
Yeah, gotcha. I mean, Adekunle asked in the chat, there's a really kind of poignant question. What do you think is the ideal relationship between a design system team and a design ops team? You mentioned they're adjacent. What have you seen some really great kind of well-oiled versions of how they work together?
Yes. I mean, this is my perspective. It could be controversial, but I do think that ultimately, if there are well-oiled enablement teams, design enablement teams, under that umbrella lives design operations and a design system. They are kind of just on equal footing. But a design operations lead could and should help build and grow a design system and continue to evolve that system. So like a design program manager, a design producer should be embedded into a design system to really help continue to see that through from a design lens in partnership with engineering. That's my POV.
Okay, interesting. So one thing that's really complicated about where we are as an industry is our jobs are getting so specific that we have to kind of invent new terms and new definitions and things like that. Before it was all design or it was all whatever web, and then we started to get more nuanced. Doug has a question in the chat, kind of a term question, which is like, what's the difference between a platform team and a design ops team? Is that different for organization, or are there kind of standard industry definitions, but between the two? What do you think?
I mean, that's a good question. I'm not sure that there's any standard definition for anything at this point.
Fair enough.
And all of the conversations that I've had, a platform team means many different things, and design operations can certainly support a platform team, but I don't think, from what I've seen, that they are the same. I mean, usually a platform team is supporting the kind of platform and infrastructure of the product, and an operations team is operationalizing the work.
Yeah, got it. Chase kind of dropped this dichotomy in the discussion while during your talk. Chase said, design ops equals agent of change and team in an organization. And then design systems equals agent of change in products. Do you buy that dichotomy, or do you see it differently?
I do buy it, but I also think that design systems are, like, in and of themselves agents of change, because they really are about changing the way an organization can function, about how that partnership between design and engineering works, about how people think about systems in general. So I think there's a little bit of nuance there. They're kind of like concentric circles.
Gotcha. Alexi says, you said not to celebrate because when you're done with one thing, there's always one thing ahead. Do you have any tips on how to recognize progress? So if you're always marching forward, cool, but like, how do you recognize when you're actually making progress versus standing still?
Oh my gosh, that's a really good question. I mean, oftentimes you aren't making progress, and a lot of times you actually won't even get to the end of the cycle. You have to kind of stop in the middle and go back if you haven't, connected the pieces in the right place, or talked to the right people, or evangelized, or like you missed a part. But if you are getting through something, there are these kind of milestones, whatever it is that you're attaching that success metric to, that you can take a pause and acknowledge the success. And it depends again on how you're measuring that success. It could be like more, effectiveness through engineering. It could be proven out in the product with the customers. But I think that all depends, the success point and the moment to celebrate. And it's definitely super important to celebrate. I think that we often get mired in the fact that it is constant. It is, they're the only constant we can rely on. It's certainly in design, and everywhere else at this point is change. But I think that good leadership and good teams are allowed to take moments of reflection, enjoy the successes and the wins, but also recognize that you're continually working towards that, mountaintop, which is invisible.
One of the things that we see with a lot of our clients is that for the design system team, one of the big blockers is once they get to a point where they go, we can't move any further unless there's some sort of larger organizational change that happens now. So as an example, we'll see teams that go, okay, we have good components, we have good tooling, but process, we can't really move any further unless the organization, or at least a bunch of teams as a whole, adopt, say, an agile methodology now, right? And that's a thing that just doesn't happen within a team. That has to happen across an organization. So I see a lot of teams getting blocked there, design system teams getting blocked when organizational change is needed. Do you think that the design ops team is better poised to help instigate that organizational change management versus the design team? Or because you mentioned design system teams is like a Trojan horse sometimes too. Do you find that one team is better poised than another for instituting that change?
I hate to answer this with it depends. If you have a design operations team and your organization has been committed to building a design operations team, then yes, your design operations team is probably better poised to support seeing that system through, because it is about operations. It is about operationalizing, that. The definition of that term is scale. So oftentimes, if it's just a design systems team, they're building the system. They don't necessarily have the tools to get to the next place of what it takes to change the organization, because it is, again, like the design systems and now they're completely inextricably tied, because they're so tied to changing how an organization functions. And so if you have good design ops partnership and buy-in from the organization for that design partnership and the system, then together you can start to change how that gets ingested, what that process looks like, to go through those change management kind of core principles to allow for the system to become ingested and to change the way process and practice works.
Do you think that's related to the expectation that, I don't know, leadership or an organization has over what they think design ops is versus what they think a design system team is? Is it just that design ops are like, people look to the design ops team and expect them to be changing things for the better for everybody? Do you think that's part of it?
Yeah, I don't think that that's generally what people think when they're hiring designers.
Oh, okay.
I would say, and that's why I think that the maturity model is really important to think about, because if organizations are on the lower end of maturity, and like design ops is kind of a buzzword right now, there's a lot of people doing design operations, and so they're like, oh, I hear like we could hire design ops people and they'll help figure out how to scale this whole design thing that we've got going on that we don't know what to do with, right? But really, they don't actually know what that means. And then there's 1,000 different things that they expect from a design ops person to do. So it's like there's a little bit of friction, and oftentimes I actually feel that if the organization is not bought into what design operations can actually do, then it is for certain kind of dead on arrival. And it will take a while. It would take a long while to actually implement the change that is much broader. That's kind of, I think I've lost the second part of that question.
Yeah, no, I get. So, one thing that's related to that, and I think this has come up in maybe just about every talk at Clarity this year, is how do you know that you're there? So Allard has a question about, like you said, the systems work is actually measurable, right? And he said, this is proven notoriously hard for design system teams to just understand how to measure that. So how do you approach measuring design system impact?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that is a really, really hard question, right? And I think that this is the question that everyone's asking all the time, right? Like, it's the visibility question, it's the measurement question, and I think that the way that we've approached effectiveness of a design system is really kind of measuring the how much it's being used internally, like how many people are partnering. And the way I see it is, like, from an engineering perspective, I actually find the success to be how committed the engineering team is actually to the design system.
Nice.
And like, I'm a huge advocate for that bridge and partnership. I'm a huge advocate for design technology, but I often feel like, and I've seen, and I've been really surprised to hear over time, a lot of engineers just really want to take over and own the system, which I don't think is the ideal either. But I do think that when you begin to see it baked more, and again, this is kind of, you have to build your own KPIs or your own, or whatever they are, success metrics. But from my perspective, when you begin to see engineering contributing and really wanting to be part of that conversation with design, I think that partnership and that communication is kind of critical to seeing the ultimate success of that design system just scaling, expanding.
Yeah, awesome. Let's round it out. We'll go to a little bit more of a personal note. I'll ask you one or two more questions, and then we can wrap it up. The first one's a light one. Angelo says, we see a guitar in the background there. Any chance, what are the chances of a guitar solo on this?
No, not going to happen. This happens all the time because I share a studio with my husband. I say, he has it by night and I have it by day. It's not mine.
Is that your husband's guitar?
Yeah.
Awesome. Very cool. All right. Last question. Eric asked, what resources do you recommend to dive deeper into this topic? And before you answer, I want to plug something for you here, which is that you have a podcast. You and Jackie Fry have a podcast about it's self-awareness for design, because you're tired of the same old talks from the same people about design. Can you talk a little bit more about that, and then maybe add a couple of more resources about learning about design systems and design ops and all of that kind of stuff?
Yeah. Yeah, Jackie and I partner on a lot of things, but most of the conversations that we've had over the years were really about this type of stuff. And in the beginning, she and I were really the only ones who were talking about design operations from a much broader perspective, from that kind of systems perspective. She comes at it from like like social sciences perspective, and I come at it from like a cognitive neuroscience perspective. And so when we started hearing more interesting talks, it was really about things that were not about design necessarily. And it was like, oh my gosh, we live in this bubble where everyone talks about design all the time, and we're kind of design. And it's just like meta. Like we want to bring in, have more conversations about things that are much, that were happening well before this, as well as the things that are incredibly important to changing the way the system works. So that system rewiring. And so fundamental to the things that we talk about and the people that we bring on the organization and on the podcast are people who are really thinking about design work differently. So from like a systems perspective or society-centered design lens, to people who are bringing in design processes into public schools around the country, to people who are thinking about just dismantling design thinking altogether. So kind of challenging all of it and just, having fun and good conversation. It's a total like side passion project just because we really like talking to each other.
Oh, it's called Uncommon. Is that right?
In Common. And
sorry.
OMMON, because it's about all the commonalities and so many things. It's like you were talking about beavers, and when I was looking for an example in ecology, it's like, well, honeybees, everybody can completely relate to, but I wanted to talk about sloths. I wanted to talk about beaver. Like, it's like so many things I wanted to talk about in ecology that would be good references. But yeah, so that's what that's all about. And so anything that I would recommend there are not really many books on design operations. There's the one I referenced in the talk, which is Org Design for Design Orgs. That's kind of the beginning, the first book. There is a handbook, a design ops handbook that Envision put out, which is pretty great. But I come at it and I think about, there is a book, Behave, about behavioral science. It's Robert Sapolsky, which I really love. And then also Community, which I reference in my talk as well, by Peter Block, I think is an incredible book as well. So it's coming at it again from like the social sciences perspective and the neuroscience perspective, because I'm continually trying to figure out how people work.
Excellent. That's so awesome. Alison, this was a masterclass for all of us in how to create change, how to do better work that we're all trying to do. Thank you so much for this awesome talk.
Thank you.